To the name thing. Some people knew me as Elijah, other people knew me as Dee. Because I played keys almost as much as I played drums. Some people didn't know I even played drums. Some didn't know I played keys. Because usually would never be in the same instance, you know. It's important that like whenever you're putting yourself out there, that people know who you are. Like sometimes I had to tell folks, they were like, Elijah Holt, I thought Dee Dee was playing. I'm like, no, it's the same. It's me. They both me, you know. Just a little tidbit. But anyway, what I really want to talk about today is elements of being a studio musician as it relates to playing drum set. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna play this tune I just handed to you. It's called Title. It's by a friend of mine that I've done a lot of work with over the years named Chris West. He's actually a saxophone player. But he's saxophone is his thing, but he can play pretty much all brass instruments well enough to cut like his own brass sections at his house, at his studio, like, you know, like real talk. And he's always writing stuff. Like this is something he wrote years ago when he was at MTSU. He's from Nashville as well, but we used to play in the hip hop band together actually. And when I'm playing it, you'll see how easy that kind of thing can be. It ain't really got to be something that you sweat a lot over. Like it can, but in this case it really isn't. And in most cases, when you really start breaking down the rhythms, it really ain't that hard. Once you get used to playing in that timing environment, you know, the odd times. Because what you do, like you ask any working drummer, musician in general, most times cats ain't counting past 4. Period. Don't matter what the time signature says. And then in this case, because it's 7/4, I'll go ahead and count off 4 in my head. I'm counting like that. But that 15/8, I'm breaking it down. It even says it on the chart, like breaking it down between 8 and 7 because it's 8 notes rather than quarter. Oddly enough, I normally take my glasses off when I play because they end up around over there.
You had good control. We were good
Right,
control.
right, right. So, again, that's an example of playing a session for an instrumental track. Not going to have vocals. You're not having to worry about playing over singers or being in their way. But there are certain things that are still similar to doing that kind of a session. Let me back that chair right there. I ain't got to stand up the whole time. Thank you. There are certain things that are still similar between the two. Because typically, and if you've ever played for artists, singers in particular, you know that you got to be a certain place, right? Some of the things that are similar between doing instrumental tracks like that and then doing tracks that are geared for singers, vocalists. What is the main job of a drummer in any band? You're the clock, keeping time, right? Especially in a situation like this. If you notice, for the majority of the tune, and I was kind of approaching like playing it live, but still trying to think, what would I have done in the studio too? You can hear the pulse, whether I'm on the hi-hats, the open hats, the ride bell, the ride. You can hear that pulse in there. Like, it's hard to get lost if the pulse is happening, right? You're the heartbeat of the band. That's something I always tell cats, you know, when they ask me about playing drums, I'm like, man, you always start with the basics. Keep good time. I'm doing triplets, you know, with the ride against the snare and kick. Bass players, he's over there somewhere. The horns are back there doing something crazy. The guitar's over there doing something. It was written that way. But even then, I'm keeping it to where you can still kind of feel where we're supposed to be, where easy to get back to it. Now, typically in the studio situation, I got a splinter while I was playing. Typically in a studio situation, everybody's gonna be on ears and have a click, right? But even with that, a lot of times I've noticed if I'm playing drums on a session, or even if I'm playing organ or something, or keys, a lot of the other guys, they're not gonna have the click in their ear. They're gonna be listening to you, the drums. Because it's like, I'm gonna go with the more natural feeling thing. That way I can feel more natural when I play. Because, you know, a lot of people complain, playing with a quarter note click, it can give mechanical feeling. And it can. It's supposed to. But you don't have to. Just because you got this going in your ear, clack, 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 don't mean you got to sound like that. It's you that brings the life to it, the energy, the feel. Whether you're playing straight time, whether you're playing shuffle, you know, triplet, bossa, whatever you're doing, you know, swinging, you can still bring that feel to it to where nobody feels like that click is actually happening, but it is locked in. Because see, the deal nowadays, well, it's always been, but more so nowadays with digital recording, 9 times out of 10, everything that's going to be on the track ain't at the session you're on. They're going to come back. It's typical, especially here in Nashville. It's typical for the main guitar player to do 15, 20, 25 tracks of overdubs. It's very typical. And parts you'd never notice, and once it's all mixed and done, you won't even notice it's there, but it's there. You take it out, you notice it. They're going to go back and sequence tracks to what y'all did. If they didn't do it in pre-production, a lot of times they don't. They wait to see what the live session cats do and then get inspired from it. Go back and put drum programming, or maybe it's live percussion, or whatever else. Sometimes it's an actual orchestra. I remember doing some sessions for Disney Japan some years back. We cut the rhythm tracks, and then they brought the entire Nashville Symphony in to cut to what we did. You know, so it's like you had to be, while still giving it that energy and that feel, you know, for them to cut to. Another similarity, of course, keeping good time, keeping that pulse apparent, you know. drums, and typically when you're playing drums on most pop type stuff, when I say pop, I mean anything from rock to R&B, gospel, fusion jazz, even like what they call quote unquote smooth jazz and all that. Solid, not necessarily hard. Like I was playing really hard just now, but you want it to be solid. Like in the studio, you know, you got mics. You got every drummer's mic. Some of them mic a couple times. Even sometimes they might mic underneath the rod bell or right underneath the rod to get that ping that they want. If they want it really clear, you know, got overhead. Each tom has a mic. Sometimes you're micing the snare twice. I've seen cats. I've had some sessions where they mic the snare twice on top, once on bottom, and then a proximity mic just for the snare, like down here, but like 3 feet back, just for getting the ambiance of the snare, you know. Hi-hat mic, everything, kick, inside, outside, and then another couple mics for proximity, you know, all that stuff, you know. It can get crazy because they want to get all of the different parameters, the drums, not the parameters, but really all the sounds, the ambiance, everything part of the room. Because, you know, we're talking about physics here, right? Vibrations, frequencies. You hit that drum, the drum itself vibrates, right? The head vibrates, the drum vibrates. Depending on where you got it tuned at, you're getting different frequencies. It's going out in the air. They want to get all of that, depending on what kind of song you're doing. You know? But you want to play solid. Your kick, it should feel like the floor. You're the concrete. Your snare and hi-hat work, you know, depending on what kind of song. If you're playing straight time, then let it be straight time. It can still, even straight time can feel great. You know, just straight ahead, right? Playing straight, the swing is implied, ain't it? You can hear that swing inside of it. Even where you strike the hi-hat, like, it ain't here. I'm not doing that. I'm accent. Sometimes you could be playing straight eighth notes, but change where the accents are. We talked about this the other day. Change where them accents are. Feels like something totally different. You know, adding slight little 16ths in there. You know, but it's still the eighth note is the prevalent rhythm still. But it changes the whole feel of it, even though it's still straight time. Slight little ghost on the kick. Ghosts on the snare. Not that. We're solid though. The way I'm hitting the snare. Now, this is a higher pitched snare. It's a Black Beauty. Like I got it tuned up, you know, on purpose. But I'm hitting rim way down here, and then the rest of the stick making contact with the drum. But when I'm coming up with them ghost notes, it's a completely different dynamic. Now, there are some producers who don't want those ghost notes, and it's understandable why, because there's probably going to be other stuff filling that space in. But a lot of times, you can still do it because y'all know what a gate is and sound, like audio. They're going to set that gate. You ain't going to have nothing to do with it. Like the engineer's going to be in there. He's going to set that gate to where only that main strike comes through anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes I'm like, hey, Doc, you know, loosen that gate a little bit. You know, I got stuff going on. No. They just want that solid strike. You're the clock. Solid plan. The third thing, being deliberate in your plan. You want to be deliberate, even if something's by accident, and we know that happens all the time. Good things happen by accident all the time. Make them think it was deliberate. Make them think you meant to do it. And the next time you did mean to do it. Like make a log, make a mental note of what that was if you can. Sometimes it's pure inspiration, and that's true. It happens. But you want to be as deliberate as possible. That's why if you can, and this definitely doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does. If you get the track ahead of time before the session, the drummer ought to know it better than everybody else. If everybody got the track and the drummer is the one who's weak on it, that's bad news. It's bad news. It's just, whether it's fair or not, I don't know, We're supposed to know. Yeah. It's just expected that the drummer's going to be on top of it. Nobody else is. It's just, this is live playing and studio, especially live playing. But even in the studio, if everybody got the track ahead of time, they expect that drummer to really know everything that's going on unless something has changed, But that being said, being as deliberate as you can in the choices you make into what you're going to play. Another one of the main jobs of a drummer in any setting, you are the clock, you're keeping time, but you also set up changes in the song. This is why knowing the song, having a great understanding of the form of the song. Okay, intro, 8 measures. Verse, 8 measures. 2-measure interlude. Chorus, 8 measures. Another 2-measure interlude, or maybe it's repeating the intro. These are the things you're either reading on the chart or you've internalized in your head as you're going through it. This next chart I'm going to show y'all is more like that. See, that chart, that title chart, even though it wasn't written by a drummer, it was written for drums. Most times you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. It's going to be written by a guitar player or a keyboard player, or maybe a producer who don't even play really. But it's just going to be sections. And then, it might have hits on it like accent parts, or might not. And some producers, like, I've been on several big sessions with A-list players where there were no charts. You had everybody sat down and wrote their own chart. And you better just hope yours was right, And you'd be surprised at some of these big name cats cheating on, oh yeah, I dig that. Okay, cool. Like, you're supposed to know. Like, you've been in the game 30 years before I was born. You're supposed to know this stuff. No, man, they be looking over your shoulder, seeing what you got. But yeah, on drums, you want to be as deliberate. You want to be as time conscious. I'm talking about in the music, time conscious. Because they literally are depending on you for that kind of thing. And then playing solid. Those are the three main things. Now, I've been on both sides of that fence, cartage, and then there's plenty of times, most of the time, like I'm looking at crap myself, You bring in stuff, even if you had cartage, they expect you there a good hour or so before everybody else. One of the worst feelings in the world, and I've been on this side of it, I'm showing up 10 minutes before the session's supposed to start. I got to load in, set up, tune, then they got to get mics set up. Everybody's like, let's pull that, Guitar players tuned up, side-eyeing you, keyboard player, rolling the eyes at you, especially if there's guys you don't know. You usually expected to be there a good solid hour ahead of everybody else. Get loaded in, get set up, get tuned up, let them get mics around you and get checked, your levels. You want your gear to be ready. You don't want to show up at the session and realize you got busted heads or spring on your pedal broke. You don't, depending on how you do your snares on your snare drums, either the ties or the plastic strips, that mug done broke. You ain't got a spare. In my stick bag, I'll just show you. I pretty much got everything I would ever need for anything. So of course you want to have your sticks, your mallets. I got my brushes, my blastics, even my wood joints, just because you never know what you're going to be doing. Because I'm getting old, I even carry these joints like a wrist brace, because sometimes my grip locks up. just, especially ain't had enough water. I have to wear this brace that kind of loosens everything back up where I can still play. You just never know. What else I got? I got an extension cable for my ears or for headphones if I need it. You know, I keep it on me. You know, my other bag, pads, trinkets. You know, like this, you can't see it, but I got a little. They call it a rattler, like kind of give you the sizzle effect on a cymbal. You know, I got. Before y'all came in, this boom over here is actually the spools, but it didn't have a cymbal sleeve. I keep gaff tape in my cymbal bag where I can just tear off a little strip, put it around there. It'll work as a cymbal sleeve, so you don't tear up your cymbals from the bell. You know, just everything you can think of that you might need, you need to keep on you. Because believe me, ain't nobody else gonna have it. Some engineers at the studios, they'll have gaff tape a lot of time, but you don't want to be asking for it. You know, you wanna have your own stuff. Here's another bag with all my more pads, wing nuts, hi-hat cups, just in case. You know, you just never know. You always want to be prepared. I keep a hi-hat clutch, a pearl hi-hat clutch in particular. I also keep in here. I'm actually using it today because the pearl hi-hat clutch is pretty much universal. It'll work on any brand. Yamaha, Tama, of course Pearl, Ludwig. It'll work on just about any brand hi-hat stamp. There are other things. Of course, your drum key. You don't ever want to be, what are you doing playing drums? Your drum key is just as important as having your sticks and all the other stuff. Up here, you know, other little trinkets, more wing nuts, Band-Aid, because I've been cut plenty of times, you know, getting set up, or just finger caught the cymbal the wrong way, cut myself. It happens. The little sticky, you know, what do you call them?
Moon dots.
Yeah, moon dots, the gel, yeah, muffle stuff.
Antlers.
Yeah. Keep them on. I always keep gaff tape too because you can use that. It'll always work. That's the old school method, you know. Sometimes you're not using your own stuff, even in the studio. Sometimes you're walking into a session, especially if they're not paying much and they have a house kit. I'm using the house kit to, you know. The kick works. I'll bring a snare and cymbals, you know, but I'll bring an EQ patch for the kick drum, just in case. Maybe it doesn't have anything on it, or maybe the head isn't really up to par. These kind of things can help it sound better, you know. Yeah, man. Little stuff like that. But timeliness, being on time, being able to, you want to know your gear. You want to know exactly how long it takes you to set your gear up and be ready to go. Like, you want to have that, learn it down to a science, really. And it's important, like, because you never know Nashville traffic. You know, you're trying to get from, like, I live out by the airport. A lot of these studios, if it's not at somebody's house, off the beaten path somewhere, then you're coming up in Midtown, you know, that traffic all day. You know, if you ain't giving yourself enough time, and see, again, I'm from here, and so sometimes I just don't think, like, you used to be able to get all the way across town in 20 minutes. You absolutely can't do that anymore. You know, that's my, you know, my fault, but it's like, man, I forgot it, you know. Sometimes it can take you a full hour, you know. You know? So you always want to keep that kind of stuff in mind. I check the traffic, you know, ahead of time, like, what's it looking like? That's just about being a professional on the session. When you're dealing with cats, especially if you're dealing with people you don't really know, which that happens. You want to get to a point where that's happening, where you're getting called on sessions you don't even know any of these folks, and then you get to know them. You make yourself available. You make your voice heard. You know, if you got an idea, if you feel like it's of merit, and you really thought about it, speak up. Make yourself more valuable. Like, producers actually love that. A lot of the time, not all the time. You got some real tripped out producers that ain't trying to hear nothing from nobody. But a lot of the times they are, especially if it works. That's whether or not you get credit for it or not don't really matter, because the main thing you want out of it is callback. Get on the next session. Doing session work can be a great side income. It can be your main income. There's plenty, doing session work as your main income isn't what it used to be. It's just because the music business isn't what it used to be monetarily. It just, with streaming and all that, the system has just changed quite a bit. And like I've lived through those changes. But it can be a great source of income even if it's not all that you're doing. Fortunately nowadays too, and all of y'all are hip to this, I'm sure, what used to cost $100,000 worth of gear to do, you can do on your phone now, right? Every iPhone got GarageBand. If you any kind of computer, you can download free DAWs, digital audio workstations. Record yourself. Recording yourself not only on drums, but just in general, you see where your flaws are. You can critique yourself. Self-critiquing is one of the best tools you can have. And you figure out, like, I know for myself, I push the downbeat. I play, especially on keys, but even on drums. Even if the click is here, I'm typically going to be, who was it? Steve Jordan. Y'all know who Steve Jordan, the drummer?
Yeah.
Used to play with John Mayer. Well, he was the original Saturday Night Live drummer back in the day. But he's done all kinds of stuff over the years. But he's one of the most time-conscious drummers I've ever seen, ever heard. But he has this whole theory about the quarter note. There's three sides of it. There's right on it, it's just ahead of it, and just behind it, right? I'm typically that guy that's right ahead of it, typically. Not all the time. Now, I've learned over the years to really lock in. Now, I'm from the school, like, back, we didn't use no clicks, drum machines. You just played and hope for the best, Now, I remember first starting to do sessions, these are the early days of digital recording, MIDI recording, and them clicks were not necessarily they really wasn't, not really dependable. Like, you would start, and they would start trailing themselves off. And they look at you like you were crazy. But I was intimidated by them, actually. Like, I was, back, it was hard to do until I remember one of my mom's students gave me a drum machine. She was actually Miss TSU back then. She had a Elisa's HR-16 drum machine that she gave to me. And I'm like, dadgummit, I'm going to sit here and work this until I got it. I just sat there and worked different tempos, different time signatures until I felt comfortable. Because the studio thing was starting to get busy. Like, I was starting to get, I was fortunate to just be around a lot of people when they were getting started, producers, artists, and they knew me like from playing at churches and things like that. And I was blessed with the benefit of the relationships. That's the thing about going back to not knowing people when you get called for these sessions. Make the relationships, get the number, trade the Instagram, whatever you're going to do. Get to know them. Make yourself known. And, you want to get around, I don't know how old y'all are, but if you approaching 21 or past it, get out in the city. Get out where people are playing. Going back to studio work. Now, let's take another approach. Let's say you are doing a session for, an artist. It's going to be based on a singer. So I brought another chart. This is actually something I recently did for a Tiny Desk submittal, actually. It's called A Phase by this artist named Ayanna Spalding. Now this is more like rock-ish. It's pretty down in. Pass it back to him. It has some rock elements. It's way more straight ahead, way more disciplined playing. And you can see this chart. Only thing it's giving you is chords and form. It's got some hits, sorta. Sorta. But this is what I mean by a lot of times it ain't drummers or even people thinking about drums making these charts, you know. So you just kind of have to bring your own creativity and trust your training, you know, on stuff like that. Maybe open this mug up. I'm actually going to change snares. Now, I know it's not probably realistic, and it definitely wasn't for me when I was in college, but if you plan on making studio work part of your thing, you want to start collecting stuff. What I mean by collecting stuff, I'm talking about in particular snare drums and cymbals. Snare drums and cymbals. This is another Ludwig. It's a supraphonic. This is the John Bonham snare. Y'all know who John Bonham is or was? Ooh, do yourselves a favor and look him up. John Bonham. Led Zeppelin. You heard of the rock band Led Zeppelin? He was the drummer. This was his go-to snare, the supraphonic. Now, again, you can already hear it's beefier, a little more full. I got it pitched kind of right in the middle, you know. This is the snare I used on this session, actually. But, uh-oh, I lost a lug. Where'd you go? Look at me, not taking care of my gear. We'll find it. But that happens, like you gotta pay attention, especially when you're playing hard. Them lugs loosen, the vibration, it loosens them lugs like you don't even notice it sometimes. I sure did lose it. Oh well. Again, more discipline is for a singer, so you're approaching it way more deliberate than you would an instrumental session. See if I can remember this one. Let me see. I need that bag. Use mallets on this too. I like to use mallets for cymbal swells in the studio. You can use sticks, and a lot of times they end up not really sounding that much different. I just like using the mallets because it's a better crescendo, a smoother crescendo, especially when the stuff is mic'd up.
You said you don't love me no
see way more here than here, you know, all over. Even though it's rocking, a lot of times it's here too, you know. But very deliberate in the approach. Even the fills and stuff. And, you know, especially like with R&B, and even especially gospel more so than even R&B nowadays. Because if you really pay attention to a lot of these R&B drummers, even live, even the ones who chop a lot of times live, they're not. It's open. They're playing open fills a lot of times because there's so much other stuff happening. They're using them 8 and 10-inch toms to cut through the mix when they do take their chances and take their spots outside, you know, they kind of go left a little bit. That's why they use those small drums, because it's going to cut through the mix on the live part. But in the studio, well, most R&B, you're not really cutting live in the studio. If they are, they're intending to sound as if they're not live. Like it's real straight, like no fills. You might have some hi-hat flares, or you might, you know, hear something on the crash, but typically you ain't gonna hear no toms. But even with more rock type stuff and other types of pop stuff, when you're playing, when you do fills, it's not meant to throw anything off. It's meant to be, it's gotta be in the pocket. No fill is worth losing the pocket over, if that makes sense. It's never worth it. It's always better to stay in that zone. You will always make more bread in the pocket. It's just the truth. The pocket will keep you paid. I'm not saying don't do other stuff. You want to maximize your talent, man. You want to do everything you can, take it as far out as, you know, I mean, y'all know who Chris Dave is, right? Hey, Chris Daddy. Hey. I remember when he was doing church choir records. Straight ahead, dog. Straight. But he would give you here and there, like he would take his moments and just like, the heck was that? You know, and then go right back into the thing, you know. But you know how far out he can take it. Like, man,
give him that
those same three
right.
things are still happening. Playing solid, beating the clock, and being very deliberate in the choices you make about what you're gonna do, what symbol you're gonna hit. I remember doing this rock record. The producer, his name was Angelo, what's his like? He has an Italian last name. He's the same guy that does all the Kings of Leon stuff. He was the producer on this session. And his engineer, I can see his face, can't think of his name. He was so cold, like you can't see the drums. Like in the drum room, that I was cutting in was as big as this room up in upstate New York. Mm-hmm. And like the whole wall is glass way up in the mountains. And like the trees are changing colors and stuff. It's the most beautiful, serene view in the world, like up in the mountains. But where the control room was, you couldn't even see the drums. And like I had just gotten a deal with Sabian Cymbals. And so they had sent me a whole package of cymbals up there to mess with. So I'm like trying stuff out. So we're doing in between takes. I change a crash. And so we do the take. He stops us in the middle of the take. Dee, did you change cymbals? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you know, he can't see me. He's just hearing. He heard, like, I'm only using one crash. He can hear it. Like, I'm talking about going, like, from a 17 to a 16. And, like, he heard it. But anyway, Angelo used to be like this. Like, we never cut more than one song a day. He was into this whole thing about band takes. Essentially, the drums, the bass, and I think on those sessions we were cutting guitar with drums and bass. And it's like, until everything is together in the same take, it ain't a take. See, I was used to the gospel world. I come in and do my one take, my one pass, and I'm done. I'm waiting on everybody else. You know, no, man, band takes. But it taught me a lot about how to really play with other musicians, especially in the studio. Like, Corey, you've heard me say this. EJ, you've heard me say this. And commercial ensemble. Drummer and bass player, y'all need to be talking to each other. I ain't talking about verbal. I'm talking about in the playing. There needs to be constant communication, the drums and the bass player in particular. Everybody else will fall in. But the drums and the bass player, and it's the same thing in the studio. Like, You locked into what you're doing, he's locked in or she's locked into what they doing too. But y'all should have, that Jedi mind thing going. Like there's language there. There's magic to be had and to be played between the two of you. As drummers, it's important to find that, even if you got to be the one that establishes it. I've always said a whack bass player can make a great drummer sound average. Same thing, vice versa. A whack drummer can make a great bass player just sound terrible. Y'all at least want to be on equal footing. You might have to bring the bass player up to your level. You might have to. Or maybe the bass player can bring you up to his. I'll take my lumps if I need them. If I'm the one coming up short, hey man, let's lock this in. Tell me where you are. Show me where you are. I'm going to try to get there. These are just things that you always want to be considering. Every session I ever do, man, no matter how big or small. And I've done plenty big ones and plenty of really small ones. That's what you want to be thinking about. Even when you're doing your own stuff, these are the things you want to be thinking about. Because one thing I've noticed with myself, at least, and I've heard other musicians / producers say this, when you're doing your own stuff, a lot of times you shortcut it. You take the short way around. You don't really, because you're the producer, it's like, okay, I can make that work, No, man. Do the work. Take the steps. You know what I'm saying?